When a topic really grabs Edward Hume's interest, it has a good chance of becoming a book. A very good book. Starting on the mean streets of juvenile court to the battlefields of evolution, Hume's has fearlessly tackled it all, earning accolades and stirring controversy along the way. Trash and our environment is a repeat topic. From the plastic bottles we toss without a second thought, to the mountains of electronic waste piling up in forgotten corners, Hume shines a light on the environmental catastrophe lurking in our own backyards. His new book, Total Garbage, offers a comprehensive and actionable roadmap for individuals, businesses, and policymakers to rethink our relationship with waste and work towards a more sustainable future. Longtime friend Rob Curley leads tonight's conversation. Please welcome back Edward Humes to the Northwest Passages stage.
Am I going?
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
It's so good to have you back. And we love to send you places where you're going to get kicked out. It just never gets old.
I know, right?
So this is a repeat story for you, really. 'Cause you've written so many great books. What, 17? 18, 19? I've lost count.
Yeah, 17, I guess
17,
that sounds right.
And this is a follow-up to Garbology. And next week is...
Wait, the subtitle's the best part. Our dirty love affair with trash. I mean, come on.
It's always
Can't
about
skip
the
that.
dirty love with you. So, sorry about that. It just slipped out. so, Earth Day. This is the perfect time for this to come out. And when I think about all of these things, and I just, everything in my mind comes back to community news. And we both love newspapers. I love putting this one out. I put you in there a lot. We should get new photos of you. So what got you into journalism? I mean, you've had this great career, won a Pulitzer.
Yeah.
What made you want to be a journalist?
Well, you know, I was thinking about that. I think I must have started writing stories when I was 5 or 6, usually with a crayon, because I illustrated back then. But when I was in school, college, I took this course and I learned about the muckrakers of the early 20th century, these journalists who were exposing all kinds of problems of wrongdoing, and they had huge impact, and they really helped their communities all over the country deal with it, and by telling the story. And I said, who wouldn't want to do that for a living? So I started working part-time at the couple little newspapers near the college I was at in Massachusetts. It's called a stringer when you do that. I'm not sure what the origin of that term is, but it's kind of, maybe it's because you have to live on a shoestring with the amount of money they pay you. And I actually got my first front page expose in the Amherst Record, a twice a week, little community newspaper. But I had the bug. I've been doing it ever since, and I love it.
This is all I've ever wanted to do since I was in the 3rd grade, Ed. I've had no luck with women since I was 11.
Oh, actually, I wanted to be the next Jacques Cousteau when I was, in 3rd grade, because those National Geographic specials I grew up on just kind of kept it.
I've been asked, why do you care so much about local news? And I tell people, the newspaper I grew up reading would put on the front page who visited who at the nursing homes. I thought that's what news was. So I just love that. So this is one of the big funny takeaways in the book. How? I mean, I love Red Bull, but I don't drink a lot of plastic.
No, or at least we don't think we do. I mean, I guess I did want to start the book with kind of a wake-up call. And the problem with plastics is they're getting into everything. And I hear all the time, well, but we need plastic. It's important. We couldn't have a whole lot of things that we love without it. And I say that's true. But plastic was invented over 100 years ago to make durable things, to make beautiful things, to make useful things that last, because plastic kind of lasts forever. It's the first mass-produced synthetic substance. It's a fossil fuel product. Nature can't digest it, decompose it. None of the things that break down natural substances work with plastic. That's its beauty. Why in the world would you make something disposable out of something that lasts for 500 years in the environment? That's the crazy part, is the disposable plastics. And they are in everything. It's in our air, it's in our water, it's in our beer. You can go to a pristine environment covered in snow, and if you melt the snow and drink it, you will be getting plastic particles in it. We have done what nobody thought was possible. We have changed our environment by something that we make and set loose in the environment. And the data that was developed by the World Wildlife Fund suggests we're eating up to a plastic card a week of plastic particles, often too small to see or barely visible. And it gets through our filters, it gets out into the world, and it gets into us. And we are participating in a giant lab experiment. What's going to happen when we have plastic as a staple of our diet? Nothing good.
Sometime in newspapers, when you recognize immediately the topic is, you call that the lead. So did you know that you were going to open the book the way you opened it? Because it's the lead.
I wanted to write a book about the larger world of waste, not just what we throw away, which is what the first one, Garbology, was about. My idea was that we're only dimly aware of that part of our waste and where it goes and where it ends up. But what about the other waste embedded in our daily lives, in our energy, and how we heat our homes, and how we cook, and with our clothes? Our food waste is off the charts. 40% of our food and all the effort and energy and water and fertilizer and everything else that goes into it is waste. What does that do to us? What does it cost us? And what can we do about it? I didn't want to doom scroll. I wanted to find communities and neighborhoods and individuals who had real solutions that didn't wait for Silicon Valley or Elon Musk to solve for us, but that we already knew how to do. Because if you talk about waste as the big source of our problems, it's a big tent. Everybody knows waste is no good. It's bad. It's a cost. It's a loss. And it brings people into a different conversation about what's happening to our environment, I think.
Yeah. So the 3 R's were reduce, reuse, recycle. Now, what are the new?
The 8 R's.
It's 8 R's.
Yeah. Put that up there. So I added a couple.
Yep. All right, walk us through these.
Well,
you can also look right here.
The most important. Thank you. There it is. Yeah.
So you have to look down.
Smart.
Yeah.
My neck is hard. Rethink is kind of the key, because if waste is much bigger than what we throw away, we need to think about it differently. We need to see it, because it's embedded in everything, and it's also fixable in everything. The key takeaway for me was talking to people who are solving the waste and transportation piece of it, or who are helping turn wasted resources into food in food deserts. They just look at the world differently, and they see the opportunities that await if we just are open to them. And that was mine. I don't have the solutions. I went out and found people who do, and I tell their stories. And that I left feeling much more hopeful about our future, and the possibility of turning a lot of things around that the doom scroll kind of is convincing us are hopeless. I don't think we're hopeless, and I don't think we're helpless.
So we've all heard of Craig's list and Angie's list. Owen's list is new to me. Tell us the story behind Owen's list.
So this is one of the early solution stories you read about in Total Garbage, if you read it. It's Owen is a 7-year-old who came home from school one day where they had a lesson in recycling. There's Owen back then. This is a while ago. And that's his dad, Ryan Metzger. And he said, "Dad, we got all these batteries in the drawer, in this bag. What are we going to do with these? How do they get recycled?" And, Ryan says, "I don't know. Let's find out." So he makes some calls and found a place in Seattle where they lived that took batteries and actually recycled them, didn't send them to the dump, where a lot of people are not sure what to do with them, so they end up in the trash. And while they were leaving the house with their bag of batteries, they said, hey, asked the neighbors if they had anything they wanted to take. And they said, yeah, we have a bunch of batteries we don't know what to do with either. So they drove over there. And Owen was so happy when they got it to a place where it would be recycled that they decided to make it a weekend father-son project. And every week they do something different, styrofoam or film, plastic film, stuff that they specifically say don't put in your recycling bin, but they don't tell you what to do with it, right? So they were doing this, and pretty soon it expanded to the whole neighborhood, and then it was all the Queen Anne section of Seattle, and then it was West Seattle, and they had a whole email list. So this week we're picking up old Christmas lights, and I found a place that'll take them. And people started offering him money and saying, we really appreciate this. He said, well, no, I don't want to do that. Why don't you start a business? I'd pay for this. I'd subscribe. And so ultimately, he and a couple of his early Owens List members said, let's start a social impact company, and they called it Ridwell. And that was their model. They would recycle the stuff that everybody said couldn't be recycled and find a place and be transparent about it. It wouldn't be the black hole that we have when we throw something away. You'd know exactly what happened to your stuff. He's in 8 states now and cities, Los Angeles, Atlanta, all over the place, and of course Seattle, which is the headquarters, and it's actually growing. People are willing to pay $15 a month to have this taken care of. A success for him is getting maybe 20% of a zip code to say, yeah, I'll do this, and he's getting that in a lot of communities where you might not expect it, and it's transformative. Everything from used eyeglasses that he found nonprofits who distribute them to the unhomed who are in need of them, and other products that have new life, or things that are remanufactured. Plastic bags and plastic film, no matter where you throw them away, they don't get recycled. They're not recyclable. They're theoretically recyclable, but they aren't because it's too expensive, or there's no use for it, or it tangles the recycling machinery that does other stuff. He found a company called Trex that makes outdoor products like decking, and it kind of looks like wood, but it lasts forever, and it's like a vault that locks up this plastic that otherwise get in the environment. It's actually quite a nice product. And they'll take as much as he can provide them because his stuff is clean. Materials have to be clean to be of any value. Any contamination, food or whatever, renders it useless. So he makes sure that the material finds that kind of home, and it's something the regular recycling infrastructure has never been able to do. He found a way to do it. Cool.
I love that.
He connects the dots.
So,
from a father and son project. So thank you, Owen.
Yeah, look at that. There he is.
Yeah.
Love that kid.
He's a cute teenager now, but he was a really cute 7-year-old.
So how did we, as a culture, generate all this trash? 400 million tons a year.
Well, that's how much plastic waste, not just trash, that's how much plastic waste worldwide. Yeah. And America is, even though we're not the largest country in population, we use a lot of disposable plastics. We're number one in throwing that stuff away. And, in the 1960s, the average American's trash had, how much plastic the average American trash had? 0 in it. It was a rounding error. And now it's the biggest component of our waste in volume. And it's getting up there in weight as well. And we've been normalized into disposability. We have a disposable economy now that didn't exist before, but now we seem to think it's necessary. And that's part of the rethink. There's not a single disposable plastic item that you can't have an alternative to that is not as dreadfully bad for the environment. And it's really not that hard, but it's so ever present that it's hard to see anything other than that's just the way it is.
Did you see the poll we did with the audience before? Because this is clearly the well-behaved people.
Yeah. I saw a lot of thrifters out there, so yay, that's like one of the best things you could do for the environment and your pocketbook, so nice.
How did trash become America's #1 export?
Well, that was the Garbology story because that was our fake recycling. Anything you put in the recycling bin that was plastic or paper, 50% of it would actually be loaded onto container ships because a lot of full containers come to us from other parts of the world and the empty ones go back. So one of the number one things we were putting in those empty containers was our trash, and China would take it and remake it into other products, which sounds like recycling, but in fact, the conditions and this is back a few years, were dreadful. The plastics went to an uncertain fate. Much of them ended up just being loosed into the environment. So what we thought was being recycled was actually becoming plastic pollution. But in 2018, China said, no mas, we do not want that plastic anymore. We have enough of our own, thank you. And we've been warning you for years. We're going to stop paying to be your trash compactor. And that was finally cut off. We were not prepared for that, even despite the warnings. Our recycling systems crashed everywhere because suddenly an income stream, because they paid quite generously for this, for stuff nobody else wanted, suddenly we were having to pay a lot to have it recycled. And a lot of towns around America couldn't do it, so they stopped recycling. And we're still trying to recover that because the pandemic followed a year later, and all the supply chains were disrupted that were still intact. So we are now recycling less than we did before the pandemic because of this change. We let our infrastructure deteriorate that had existed earlier in the 70s and 80s for recycling, and it's only slowly being restored.
One of your gifts is finding great people to talk to, and you found a number of fantastic people, but almost characters are so great. Tell us a little bit about Dr. Jenna Jambak, also known as the Trash Genius.
The Trash Genius. Well, she is literally a MacArthur genius, and her grant, you're familiar with the MacArthur Award, Fellowship Awards. It's an $800,000 grant to spend however you wish, and her wish is to continue her work researching plastic pollution. She is the world's foremost expert. She led the study to quantify how much was going into our oceans, and she found it was 10 years ago, between 8 and 12 million tons of plastic was entering our waterways and getting into, basically into our food chain a year worldwide. And that's since doubled in the last 10 years, at least. So it's a horrifying statistic that no one quite expected to be as high as it was. And she gained a platform from that work. She became a UN ambassador and also for the State Department, traveling the world, helping communities deal with their plastic pollution problems. And it's fascinating to see what she does. She does a field study of where the plastic's coming from and then helps communities tailor a solution to try and slow the flow. And I went on her field study in Tifton, Georgia, and I'll never look at a supermarket the same way. She warned me, people cry when you go shopping with me. And I didn't cry, but I did feel like, how did I not see this before? I'll never forget the rice aisle. And there's this, in a Walmart supercenter has its kind of a giant grocery store within the larger store, and we were in the rice aisle there, and she said, I challenge you to find the healthiest and the most sustainable packaging for rice there. And all the healthiest products, all this fine organic rice, were in utterly unrecyclable containers, and the only recyclable material was the cardboard box that the least healthy product there was, rice-a-roni, the most chemicals, the most salt, the most heart attack in the box, that I could recycle. And it was crazy because there was maybe 4 or 5 core products on this aisle, but there was 18 different kinds of packaging. Most of it couldn't be recycled. And the revelation is they weren't selling us the rice, they were selling us the packaging because that was the only differentiator. And it makes it utterly unrecyclable.
Yeah.
A product that back in the day was sold in bulk. You get a sack of it, that would be it.
So you tell a story in here that very much affected me when I was a kid. So my parents would, if you don't know this, I can be a little bit of a crier. Like a good Hallmark commercial will bring me down. But this thing would wreck me when I was a kid. And
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it. Write for Pollution Booklet, Box 1771, Radio City Station, New York.
So your book points out that this wasn't everything that we thought it was. Tell us about Iron Eyes Cody.
Iron Eyes Cody.
Yeah, the Italian.
Yes, he was not of Native American ancestry, nor were his clothes authentic, and nor was the pollution there. It was carefully curated to avoid identifying anything to the sponsors and funders of Keep America Beautiful, which was the packaging and beverage companies who were causing the pollution in the first place. This was an incredible call to arms in the minds of many viewers. You could still see comments going up on YouTube where this video lives on eternally, saying, this is the most powerful environmental message I've ever heard. It really moved me to do better. And it was, in truth, the most successful greenwashing in history, because the entire purpose of this advertising campaign, which went on for years, was to convince us that pollution, and particularly packaging pollution that you saw in that picture, was our fault. And it was a successful bulwark against laws, over 1,000 pieces of legislation sponsored in the early 70s to require beverage and deposit container systems to be maintained rather than abandoned in favor of disposable packaging, because without any notice to the public, the beverage industry had switched business models from one where they were responsible for their packaging and they wanted it back and they reused it. That was Coca-Cola, for instance. Entire business model was to have plants that were both reception and cleaning and rebottling systems. A single glass bottle could be used up to 50 times that way, and then it would be ground up and remanufactured into another glass bottle. Now suddenly, all that expense could be made to go away by sending out no deposit bottles that we're not going to take back. And nobody really considered what the consequences of that would be. And when it became apparent that it was the kind of pollution you were seeing in this picture, legislatures and the US Congress tried to say, hey, you need to be responsible for this mess you're creating, and they successfully beat it back because, hey, it's consumers' fault. People make pollution. People can stop it. That was a very sellable, actionable message that seemed to make sense. But as we know, we haven't been able to stop pollution because the ultimate cause is a product that can't be dealt with by any means known to science. We recycle 6% of our plastics in this country, notwithstanding them all being stamped with those chasing arrows. And this is one of the reasons why that model succeeded and the legislation failed until now. So there is hope. You want to talk about the producer responsibility?
Let's hear it.
So there's a woman in Maine, a single mom named Sarah Nichols. She worked for an environmental nonprofit, the Natural Resources Council of Maine, and every time she saw that ad, she got pissed off. And she said, this is just not right. I make my kids clean up their room when they make a mess, and yet these guys are making a mess of all our rooms, all our natural rooms and spaces, and they don't have to clean it up, and that's not right. That's not capitalism, right? In capitalism, you get your profits, but you bear your costs. We're subsidizing that. We have to pay for the recycling that's not working and the landfilling and everything else. And so she worked 8 years retail politics, going to town councils and rubber chicken dinners with the Rotary and every place else where she could talk this idea up. And finally, a bill was introduced in the Maine legislature, which she had basically written, requiring any companies that sell bottled and packaged material in Maine or products and claimed they were recyclable, had to make sure they were recycled. or they couldn't sell them in Maine. And they had to pay, if they didn't do it, they had to pay a hefty cost for that, which would be administered by the state stewardship council. And they opposed it, but Sarah won. She sold this idea because it makes sense. Polluters should pay, not taxpayers and consumers. And they like that in Maine. The same law has been picked up in 18 other states so far.
That's what I was about to ask, is
and
how realistic.
It's changing.
Yeah.
It's a game changer because if a producer, a beverage company, a big brand is responsible for dealing with the consequences of their wasteful product, it's a big incentive to rethink their packaging, to either make the material more recyclable, or to try, I don't know, reusables that was the mainstay of the industry for 75 years before they decided to change it. So it's promising, still emerging legislation because they're doing the rulemaking now and putting everything into place, but we'll see what happens. I think it's going to change things for the better.
You've been to Spokane several times, and you got to hang around a bunch of places yesterday. What can Spokane and its people do to be more proactive in this battle?
Well, there's a lot of things you can do, short of like getting the legislature to change things, although Washington's working on it, I think.
That's a good
That was
point.
dramatic.
Yeah, that was.
If you're a soda lover, see, I don't say give up anything in this book. I don't believe in bans. I don't think they work. They just upset people. But there's other options. You love soda? Buy it in a can. Buy it in glass. Get a soda stream and make your own. Apparently, it's a lot cheaper that way. I'm not a soda drinker, but I look for packaging that's basically infinitely recyclable, which would be an aluminum can or a glass bottle. Now, that doesn't always happen, but it's more likely to happen that it gets recycled than a plastic bottle, which is more likely not to be recycled.
So I want to switch over here to, let's see, I mean, I'm from Kansas, and I only lived in California for 5 years, but this is the most California thing I've ever heard someone say ever.
Well, we all used to eat our yards. Not that long ago.
Yeah,
the idea of a grass lawn
grade,
is no, not that kind. No. So grass lawns are a relatively new phenomenon, except for the very rich, and because that was valuable labor and resources. World War II, they had something called the Victory Gardens, and it wasn't to celebrate the victory of World War II, it was to have food during the war. Here in America, 40% of our produce came from people's yards. It went from very little to a lot in a hurry, and that was meaningful because people had fresh food that they otherwise wouldn't have had without it, and that was a victory. And that generation still maintained that in a lot of their little patches of grass in big cities and rural areas, but it's kind of going away. It's coming back a little bit now. But I ran into this guy I wrote about in the book, Jemiah Hargens, and he was a financier, and he left that world, and he came back to his roots in Los Angeles, and he started a nonprofit called Crop Swap LA. And his idea was, there's no easy access in my old neighborhood for fresh produce, for fresh food, for stuff that doesn't come in highly processed, highly plastic packaged form. And I want to do something about that. And he had this idea he could turn a relatively small lawn into a micro farm, an urban micro farm. And he got some grants to support an experiment. He took 1,000 square foot of grass as his demonstration his beta test, and he converted it to this regenerative, solar-powered, water-conserving microfarm that could feed 25 families a week fresh fruit and vegetables from 1,000 square feet of grass, and use 8% of the water that the grass was consuming at a time before all this crazy rain and Los Angeles wanted to pay people to stop watering their lawns, so it was a godsend. And they're beautiful. You think, oh, who wants a vegetable garden where my beautiful grass was? They're gorgeous. They smell good. They don't, people would stop and say, wow, they'd actually stop their cars on the street. And say, what is that? How can I get one? So he's now got a bunch of these going. He goes to schools and is teaching them how to build these same micro farms on campus. It's tremendous. And now he's harvesting fruit from untended fruit trees around Los Angeles because they're all over the place. And a lot of rental properties have these old legacy fruit trees. And it just, nobody has time to take care of them. He says, well, I'll harvest it and take care of your trees. Our crews will come by. We'll leave some of it with you, and the rest we'll distribute where it's needed. And game on. It's just a new way of looking. So, and its motto is, why mow your yard when you can eat your yard? And the other piece of it, we were talking about this before, I think, is the nutritional aspect.
Oh, I love this. So the tomato part.
Well, all vegetables, but tomatoes are a good one. Yeah, so...
Yeah. So industrial grown tomatoes. The only thing they have more of...
the one thing we don't need. They
salt.
have 17% more salt. 14% more.
14 times more.
Times more, that's right. Salt than tomatoes that you would grow in your backyard. Or that tomatoes look like in the 1950s. You know those tomatoes you get at the supermarket, right? Does everybody love them? I mean, their only virtue is their shippability. That's what they're bred for. Well, the stuff that makes fruit delicious and fragile is the nutritious part. You know, you're taking all that good stuff out and leaving something that kind of looks perfect but is less than perfect as food. So he grows in a regenerative fashion, which is a new thing in agriculture that's kind of taken off. It's where you build soil health and the networks of organisms under the soil that conventional fertilizers, ammonia, generally kills. That's one of the reasons why industrial food is not so nutritious. So you may have a smaller yield if you're a regenerative farmer, but you're actually yielding more useful calories than the factory farms. And it's a new way of thinking that also is transformative and is a very promising solution to a food waste and food shortage problem.
So one of my other favorite parts of the book is wanting to do the right thing. The concept of voting with your wallet, it seems like it's expensive, but it doesn't have to be.
No.
And Iowa, of all places, right? Was that the state where they were doing the most, the very red state?
Yeah, no, so that's one of the top crops in Iowa is wind. You know, the farmers have energy cooperatives there, so they're actually sort of forming these cooperatives to erect wind turbines in their cornfields, and they harvest around them and drive their tractors and do, and their crop, no matter what the conditions are, feast or famine with their organic crops, they're always harvesting the wind. And if it was a country, Iowa, this did shock the heck out of me, if it was a country, it would be the second most renewably powered country in the world. So ahead of Denmark and Sweden and all those places. Only Scotland's doing better on the. I guess it's a really windy place. And I got to tell you, these farmers don't give a hoot about climate change in the decision making behind this. What they like is they now have the cheapest electricity around, and they're supplying that to their neighbors and powering and profiting from it. And that they are able to farm just as effectively while doing this. So it's adding to their bottom line, and they're proud of it because they have energy independence. Farmers like independence. And it fits in with their culture because of how they're framing the conversation there. That the old wasteful systems they were using before are costing them too much, and this is taking advantage of the material we have in hand, this natural resource, and it's beautiful.
So let's go back to the idea of the vote with your wallet, from the wallet ballot.
That was voting with their wallet.
So zero waste packaging.
Zero waste packaging.
Here.
Yeah. So okay, one of the people you'll meet is another wonderful author actually, and a chef, the zero waste chef Anne-Marie Bonneau, and she's all about getting the waste out of our kitchens. And so, why are you throwing away your pickle jars and your peanut butter jars and buying Tupperware or buying plastic bags? Those are perfectly good, eternally durable, freezable containers, you don't need plastic bags, you don't need plastic wraps, and you certainly don't want to microwave anything in them, because if you don't know this, microwaving food in plastics is the surest way to get plastic and plastic-related chemicals inside your body quickly. Many of them carcinogenic, so please don't do that if you're doing it now. If you buy a microwave meal, scrape it out and put it in something other than the plastic container. They will say it's food safe, but the laboratory results are not promising on that safety. So there's health reasons to vote with your wallet in favor of other alternatives, and many of them are just reusable. You don't need a plastic, if you have a leftover salad in a bowl, you don't need to put plastic wrap on top of it. Put a plate on top of it. That's good. That'll do the trick for days in the refrigerator. Simple stuff like that. So she's amazing, and I have her list of things you can do in the book, the zero waste.
Consolidate travel to avoid waste. Walk us through all these. We're going to hit a couple of these.
Well, transportation is the most wasteful thing we do. I don't know if you know that the physics of internal combustion. I'm sorry, guys. 80% of the money you spend at the gas pump goes to waste, and only $1 out of 5 is actually turning those wheels. So there's our miles per gallon thing that the EPA puts out. That's kind of a greenwash in a way, because we should be looking at what percentage of the fuel is wasted per gallon, and that's 4 out of 5 gallons. So that's why the push for electrified transportation makes so much sense, because electric vehicles are 90% efficient. They use 90% of the energy to actually move the car. But I'm not a big fan of these. I saw the poll of how far you drive every day. Most people said it was under 25 miles, right?
Yeah.
So, half of our trips in a car are 3 miles or less, and 93% of them are 25 miles or less. You don't need a 300-mile range Tesla for a majority of your drives anywhere. It would be cheaper to rent a car for those drives and just own something much smaller with a lot less cost and capacity. I think the car of the future is something like a golf cart, and I have a town in Georgia that's showing us how to do it. And they all still have their cars. They're real cars, as they call them. They just hardly ever use them because they don't need them. They have this other amazing, fun, more social way of getting around, little electric vehicles, micro-mobility.
Let's talk about the finding repair cafes and its role in all of this.
I'm sorry?
Finding repair cafes.
Repair cafes, that's a new and cool thing, and it's kind of a little related to, if you're a thrifter, you want to find a repair cafe because that lamp that's not working, maybe you're not handy with, there'll be somebody there who'll fix it for you, or other broken things, and it's a social gathering, and maybe it's advertised on Facebook or wherever, and you find it, they meet once a month, and you bring your broken items in there, and somebody who has the talent, they do sewing and repairs to garments at some repair cafes. It all depends on what's going on in your neighborhood. If you don't have one, I'll bet you know someone that's handy that might want to help you start one. Yeah, I see a hand up. Oh, you got one. Yay, all right. Repairing instead of replacing is a great way to lower your footprint in everything and to save money, right? And maybe it's something you love that you really want to have fixed. That's why the whole thing about have sacrifice in order to save the environment is a misnomer. So many of these things, like changing how you cook, can end up being something that you love more than what you were doing before. Yeah. If you just give it a try and open your mind to it.
Well, one of our favorite parts of Northwest Passages is when we ask the audience to take over the questions. So if we could get the lights turned on, and Christy's going to come around with a microphone. We would really love it if you would ask a question instead of monologue. So go ahead and raise your hands.
Raise your hand so I can see you. There.
Yep.
I know that we're talking about repair cafes. There was one that just started at the library. Art Salvage is opening up this weekend. I think their grand opening with a lot of reused stuff. It's really art stuff. And you, sir. Hello.
Thank you. A question about pricing. carbon things like plastics. I mean, there's sort of, if you will, a kind of carbon tax or carbon pricing. How much of that is happening in the USA, and what do you think of it as a way of helping push people away from addiction to these things?
Carbon pricing, is it?
Carbon
That's well, I think it's happening in other countries, not so much in ours. That's why I think that producer responsibility model, that these polluters pay laws, are so interesting and so powerful, because they shift the burden from trying to impose it upon individuals and kind of shaming us into changing. I think there's things that we can do, not out of shame, because they're actually in our interest, our economic interest, and our quality of life, that we want to change, and that also support a healthier environment. But in terms of big change from that's kind of top down rather than the grassroots, I think we're going nowhere with carbon pricing in this country, but producer responsibility is catching on. And it doesn't have to be just about packaging. It could be any industry that's creating a large cost for society, like the fossil fuel industry. They are very powerful and probably wouldn't like this idea, but if it is ethical, moral, and legal to impose those, well, to return those costs to the packaging industry that's creating the problem, it certainly could apply to other industries. And
All right,
it's inevitable.
I'm passing the microphone down gently.
Very gently, and I've got a flip seat. The
Sorry.
EPA just put out requirements about the PFAS, these forever plastics and things. And the challenge is, of course, is how do you filter these things out? So my question is, are there filters that you are aware of in the home, that we could put in the home, that we could filter? You know, I've got a Brita standard filter. Does that get most of the plastics out or not?
Thank you very much.
I don't know what your Brita's capabilities are. I did consult Wirecutter on the New York Times, which I recommend highly for figuring out what products, and they have a comprehensive analysis of different home filters that I suggest you take a look at, because there were some that were quite powerful in terms of what substances they can remove from your drinking water. But the PFAS problem is related to plastic pollution. They're chemicals that are often associated with plastic products, and it's just another example of our embrace of certain materials that probably we'd be better off without, and certainly not ones that are so easily shed into the environment. I mean, people installing plastic grass on their lawns because either they don't want to mow their yard, but they want to eat it either. Those things shed PFAS like nobody's business into the environment every time it rains, and people have no idea what they're setting loose when they buy these products. And I think proper labeling about what the risks are for things might be a start.
Right over here. Oh, pardon me. There you go.
I'm wondering how you feel about farmers markets as an alternative to eating your lawn.
They are fantastic. I go to one every week. So, and because it's supporting local economies, the food is amazing, and you can bring your own bags. They may try to give you a plastic bag at some of them. Don't take it. You can bring your own. I love these little mesh produce bags you can pick up, or if you're handy, you can make them yourself, and just use them and rewash them. It's just so simple. You don't need to load yourself up with plastic bags. But if you have plastic bags, don't throw them away. Just reuse it. Keep reusing them, because that's better than throwing them away.
I will move over to the other side. I'm just clearing up this end, and then I'm coming over to the other side of the audience. Here you go.
I think it was about close to 20 years ago, I read an article about how Europe was moving towards the cradle to the grave philosophy with their manufacturing.
Cradle to cradle, you mean?
Well,
circular economy?
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, since it's been 20 years, what has been the results of those efforts overseas?
The the EU countries are generally way ahead of us in terms of having a greater circularity for some products. It's very common to buy things that we get in disposable packaging from bulk kind of dispensers like wine or other liquid products that you bring your own containers to capture. There's other things that typically aren't packaged in plastic that we typically do. And part of that is because of this legislation. Part of that is because it's a cultural preference. But yeah, generally, Germany, for instance, is heavily invested in reusable glass containers for beverages in a way that we used to be but aren't anymore.
There you go.
Hi, I'm pretty old myself, and my parents grew up in the Depression era, and the saying back then was, use it up, wear it out, make do, or do without. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah, my grandmother was very much of that world, and, you know, she wasn't a particularly religious person, but the only sin she ever talked about was wasting. And by that she meant it was just wrong. I think the generation that endured depression and deprivation understood that it's folly to be wasteful. And I don't think any of us want to be wasteful. I just think we've been so heavily marketed and normalized by this enormous amount of waste embedded in our daily lives that it's really hard to see, or hard to see as anything but normal, and that we are losing that generation that knew better, and we have to sort of figure it out all over again. I guess that's just the way of human life. But yeah, I mean, I think we instinctively know wasting is wrong, and that's why it's such a great conversation as a conversation starter for all kinds of environmental concerns. It really is.
And are there any solutions on the horizon for these electricity wasting cryptocurrencies and all that?
I have no answer for that, but I do know, I just read an article about an artificial intelligence search requiring something like, 10 times the energy of a typical Google search. So we're introducing new technologies that are adding to the burden on systems that are already wasteful. And being mindful consumers is kind of a good thing. And choosing options that we know to be healthier or know to be less wasteful or, aren't that hard and should be pursued. I try to.
Thanks everybody for your patience. I'm moving back down there, so I will get to the question. Here we go.
Ed, I just want to say thank you so much for being here and sharing all this with us. For those of us in our community, and I want to give a quick shout out, we've got Tara Lassard and Shenandoah Mar up top, wave. Thank you. They are with Spokane Zero Waste.
Yay,
as well
thank you.
Yes, yep. So we have a fantastic Mendick Cafe that they run, and several other things. I'm the founder of Let's Build a Community, and we're trying to tackle the glass waste, because in Spokane County, all of our glass goes to the landfill. So my question for you is, for those of us that are trying to come up with solutions locally, how should we be getting the word out? Because I think that is some of our challenges. We have some solutions, we have passion, but it's hard sometimes to know how to get the word out to get that local support.
Ed, let me take this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know the guy at the paper? Yeah.
So when this is over, you come see me, and I will give you my business card, and we will make sure that all of you get in front of 60,000 people very quickly. All right? I promise. Though you might have a better solution, but.
No, that's a great one. I say that actually there's a lot of power in showing up at meetings of, whether it's the school district, whether it's the local council. I mean, Sarah Nichols is proof of that. She was very persistent, but just saying, hey, why aren't we recycling our glass? Why is our community not passing its own ordinances to require responsible use of these materials? And it's a slow burn to get a response, but persistence and numbers and loud voices and megaphones also can help. But yeah, I think all of these important changes started small and have a steamroller because collectively our choices and our wishes are powerful.
You mentioned the going and seeing the rice aisle and all the different packaging in the rice aisle, and none of it was sustainable. And I go to any store, electronics, otherwise, and you've got all the bubble packaging, and the packaging is the thing. In fact, we already know from a merchandise standpoint, if your packaging is not what the consumer wants, you don't sell the material. You know, your competitor will sell faster than you. How do we overcome that other than legislation? How do we change that? Because we're not, you know, there's no company that's going to say, I'm going to take a really nosedive on my packaging and then drop my sales 30%. You know, they're not going to do that. How do you get around it other than legislation?
Yeah, I don't know. We need some version of the crying Indian to get us back on track. It's got us off track. You know, I mean, marketing is a powerful force, and it's often not a powerful force for good, but it can be. I also think that if, again, it gets back to who should be responsible for the packaging that's causing harm. And that is a matter for legislation now, but that's different than determining consumer behavior through legislation, and I think that's an important distinction. That's why there's such pushback against banning things and against scolding and finger wagging. None of that's working to move the needle, but holding the creators of waste responsible does work. It's working abroad. We're now rolling it out here, and that's going to lead to changes and to packaging that you can both like and feel good about because it's not killing the planet.
All right, we got one more question here, and then the last question down to the gentleman with the blue who's been very kind in holding his hand up. He's had time. That'll be our last question.
Thank you. Thanks for doing the book. Thanks for coming here. This gives us so much hope to see all these people here. I just think it's so wonderful. You sold out. Can you think of any other things that are kind of that younger people are doing that really could come to scale to deal with such a massive problem? You've told us a few, but do you have any other ideas? You did the garbology. What other big scale?
Oh, there's a whole list in the book. So, but I'll tell you about one that really inspired me because I think actually our college campuses, like this one, are real agents of change right now and experimentation. The place I wrote about was, I'm sure you've never heard of it, the University of Minnesota at Morris, and which is in a rural farming community, Morris, and surrounding Stevenson County. Very conservative area, but the school is a former and notorious Indian boarding school was on this site. Now it's a public university, it has a large indigenous student body, but a very diverse student body from all parts of the state university. And a student-run composting program there began years ago. And it kind of became very popular because the farmers there had wanted to compost, but they were told over and over again, you'll need too much expensive equipment to do it effectively in the cold climate here. And the students figured out how to do it for cheap. They didn't need any special equipment. And the farmers loved it. And ultimately the students donated the whole operation to the county, which now operates this county-wide food and ag waste system that's really good because it provides very inexpensive compost for the farmers. They love it. And it's also a waste cutter. So that led to a partnership that they now call the Morris model that's actually spreading to different places around the Midwest, where they partnered first on LED lighting for the city. The campus had already been through this and said, oh yeah, we'll walk you through it. And this little town saved $80,000 a year on their lighting bill from making this conversion. And that doesn't sound like a lot of money for a town of 5,000. It's a lot of money. in tight times. And they said, what else can we do? And pretty soon this little farm town in Morris is driving around in electric public buses. They have solar on everything. You know, in Minnesota, the city owns the liquor store, so they have solar on the liquor store. Their motto is, we chill your beer with the sun. So they love it. And there's now this project. So the University of Minnesota Morris has these 2 giant wind turbines that generate more than 4 times the electricity the campus needs. So it goes into the grid. The power's really cheap. The students call them Bert and Ernie because one's taller than the other. And they love Bert and Ernie in Morris because now it's part of a pilot program being funded by the DOE. And it's huge because they're turning hydrogen and oxygen into ammonia, which is the most commonly manufactured chemical in the world. It's incredibly carbon intensive. The manufacture of ammonia is responsible for 1% of all global warming in the world. And it's a terribly toxic substance, but it's being produced at Morris carbon-free. It's a carbon-neutral product. And they want to take it to the next step and use that ammonia to lock the nitrogen in a substance called urea, which is not toxic. You're familiar with it, right? It's farmers around here. It's not a toxic material. It can be handled safely. You don't have to wear protective gear. It's not organic farming by any means, but it's a way of, it's a transitional product, and it's one the farmers want. They're wildly enthusiastic because it's going to be cheap. It's going to be environmentally sound. They like that. It's not maybe not their primary motivation, but they're cool with that. And this unique partnership has evolved, this symbiosis. It's just beautiful, and the farmers love it because they can stretch their dollars. They can farm more effectively. Their workers are more safe. They're more safe with products like this, and they're proud of that. They're being part of the future, and that has motivated a very environmentally friendly project that crosses partisan lines. And they're doing something that can be replicated in other ways, but with the same philosophy all over the country. And that students were driving this. And it's beautiful to see, and it's effective, and it's working.
All right, last question.
Damon Tam, and I have been working in a garbage field for over 30 years, and in Spokane has a lot of firsts. We have the first Superfund landfill in the state of Washington. We have lots of firsts. Over 50% recycling in Spokane. We have a smaller reduction per capita of garbage than almost any community. We have a waste energy plant. We generates electricity. And we generate electricity and reduce the organic product that contaminated our aquifers. Volatile organic compounds. We destroy a lot and recycle all the metals, not only from the plant, but also from the landfill, both ferrous and non-ferrous. So what other ideas? I know you're looking at ideas, but what about for cities and counties that can move forward? You know, we used citizens. Citizens became very involved with the decisions that were made here in Spokane. And we need the citizens to come up with ideas in order to further figure out what are we going to do in the future, whether it's build a waste energy plant bigger, whether it's landfill more. You know, those are tough questions when you're dealing with 1,000 tons a day.
They are, and you know, landfills fulfill an important function. You know, a lot of cities were 10 years when I wrote Garbology. You know, now 12 years ago, I guess. We're on this thing. We've got to recycle everything in landfill, nothing. And that was a wrong approach because everything can't be recycled. And some things are better off sequestered safely in a well-run landfill. But other things are best diverted, like food waste, because of the methane that is emitted from it. And that's one of the problems that our landfills still have. I'm not sure if that's the case in Spokane or whether it's harvested in some way, but I also want to say you left two things out of your list. First of all, you saw it, the garbage goat. I mean, come on, you guys. Right? And then there's the fact that the Washington water power and the Spokane Falls facility is the oldest running renewable power generation, hydropower generation in the state, I believe. The streetcars that used to power are gone, sadly, but the power is still there. So a lot of good things are happening here. One of the things I wonder if Spokane is looking at some of the technology that's being embraced in other cold places like Maine, in terms of heat pump technology for keeping buildings warm and for cooling them as well in summer, because that's a transformative technology that saves money as well as protecting the environment, as opposed to relying upon increasingly expensive fossil fuels for heat and also hot water. So I don't know if anybody here have a heat pump? Awesome, wow, all right. Well, are you saving money as a result? Raise your hand. Yeah. I like that. So that can do so much good, and also, again, an upgrade to something you're going to love more if you go that route.
Ed, thank you for hanging out with us. It's always so great when you do this.